Our first lecture introduced the theme of our course on famous Greeks. It is a study of the achievements of Greece through the lives of the seminal figures in the history of Greece. Great individuals like Cleopatra and Alexander the Great, and figures from the legendary past like Theseus. As our model from the classical world, we take Plutarch, his Lives of the Famous Greeks and Romans. And we saw that Plutarch's purpose in writing these biographies was not merely to give you facts about these individuals. It was not to prepare you for quizzes in historical literacy. It was to improve you as an individual. He was a moral writer, and he thought that you could be improved morally by studying the virtues, yes, and even learning from the vices of the great figures of the past. And we took as our first life Theseus, the founder of Athens. And in every one of our lectures, we shall try to draw practical lessons from the past, from Plutarch's lives, and from the other lives that we study. And certainly the practical lesson of Theseus is that the heroes of a people, the heroes of a nation, are an embodiment of their values. And certainly for the ancient Greeks, not merely for the Athenians, but for the Greek world as a whole, no lives were more an embodiment of their values than the heroes of the Trojan War. It is typical of the prudence of Plutarch that he did not write lives of Achilles or Agamemnon or Hector. He knew that nothing could ever equal, even come close, to the brilliance of their portrayal in the immortal lines of Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. For Plutarch, for his friend the Emperor Hadrian, for figures like Pericles and Alexander the Great, Homer was the great repository of wisdom. The role of the Iliad and the Odyssey in Greek civilization and in their heirs, the Romans, is comparable really only to the Bible in Europe or America of the 19th century. It was the source of wisdom to which you turned. Many people would simply open a page of Homer, of the Iliad or the Odyssey, and point to a line and make a decision based on that, the same way that the Bible was used for these purposes in the 18th and 19th century. So we turn now to Homer, to the Iliad, and to the great story of Troy, and to the figures of Achilles and Agamemnon. Now, to the Greeks of the historical period, the Trojan War was real history. We would date it in our own terms to roughly 1260 to 1250 BC. The Greeks believed that there had been a city called Troy. In fact, there was a classical heir to the city of Troy, Ilion, situated where the ancients believed that Troy had once been. The Greeks believed that there had been a Troy, that Agamemnon and Achilles and Hector were real individuals, that the cities of Mycenae and the other great citadels of Greece had sent forth a mighty fleet, and that they had besieged Troy for 10 years. So to them, Homer was history. And they knew the story, not only what they found in Homer, but the whole wealth of tales surrounding the material of Troy, we might call it. How Helen, whom we met earlier at the age of 16, attracting the attention of Theseus, now grown up, and the object of desire by every great king in Greece. And finally, her father decided that whomever she wed, all the other suitors must take an oath that if she were ever outraged in any fashion, they would all come to the aid of her husband. And that husband was chosen to be Menelaus, king of Sparta, brother of Agamemnon, king of Mycenae. Menelaus, probably a good deal older than Helen. They were married. And then there came to their court Paris, prince of Troy, and he committed outrage. He committed what the Greeks called hubris, outrageous arrogance, for he violated one of the most sacred of trust, the hospitality. The Greeks owed you hospitality, but in return, you swore by Zeus not to abuse this hospitality, and he did. He went away with Helen. She was apparently quite willing to all of this, and they went off back to Troy. And so Menelaus said to his fellow kings, I have been outraged. We must now take up arms. And so the word went out to all the mighty kings, and they came. Aged Nestor, the wisest of all the Greeks. They came from Crete. Two did not want to come. One of them was Odysseus, whom we shall meet later, and he tried to pretend that he was mad, and a baby, his son, was placed in the path of the plow that he was using to go up and down the sand with, pretending that he was insane, and when he turned the plow, he was taken. But Achilles came, the most famed of all the warriors, and to lead this mighty host, Agamemnon was chosen, king of the wealthiest city, Mycenae. And when the mighty host was collected, when the fleet was ready, they couldn't sail. They were there at Aulis, the port in Boeotia, and the winds simply did not blow right. And it turned out that the gods and goddesses had been offended. And to soothe the winds, to make them blow properly, the gods demanded the greatest of sacrifices, the daughter of Agamemnon himself, Iphigenia. And he lured her there on the promise that she was going to marry Achilles. And instead of wedding bells, she saw the daggers of stern-eyed men who put her to death. A charm to make the winds blow right. Agamemnon had his choice. He could have gone home, but he wanted glory and honor and sacrificed his daughter. And so the fleet sailed, but hard times awaited them. For 9 years they struggled against the mighty fortress of Troy with its proud towers, its walls with angles offset in them. And for 9 years, the fortunes of battle went back and forth across the plain of Troy. And that is where the Iliad opens. The war already having gone on for 9 years. And the whole of the Iliad is engaged with only 9 days. By focus, the poet Homer achieves the transcendence of ethical instruction and poetic beauty. 9 days only. And it starts off with death, as it will end with death. It starts off with a terrible plague ravaging the host of the Greeks. The Greek army is struck down by this plague, and the funeral pyres light up the shores of the sea. Why? Why have the gods struck us down like this? Why have they sent this plague? And it turns out that once again the gods have been offended. For in the course of battle, the daughter of a priest of Apollo, Croesus, has been taken as booty won by the spear, and she is held by Agamemnon. And her father, an aged man, comes to Agamemnon and says, "Give me back my daughter." And Agamemnon spurns him, sends him away. "Get away, old man, lest I take your life as well as your daughter." And for Homer, the gods punish this kind of insolence and abuse of power, this hubris. And so the god Apollo sends this plague. He is the god of plagues, and with his arrows, the far darter shoots down the Greek men. And the soothsayers ask why the plague, and he gives this answer. And so an assembly is called to debate, what are we to do? The soothsayer tells us that this girl must be given back. And Achilles speaks out. He is, by common consent among Greeks and Trojans alike, the greatest of warriors. And he speaks out. "Give the girl back," he says to Agamemnon, "and we will gain you many more prizes of war when one day we sack Troy." But now we see Agamemnon, for Homer introduces both of these figures with brilliance at the very beginning of the Iliad. Achilles, young, proud, self-confident. Agamemnon, older, cautious. In fact, he feels threatened by Achilles. Feels threatened by a man he knows to be his better. For it is not by bravery or prowess on the field of battle, but simply by the fact that he is the richest of the kings that Agamemnon holds this position. And so this must be some threat to his power. There must be some conspiracy afoot to rob him of his commander-in-chiefship. And so he refuses. and then says, all right, I will give her up, but I will take your mistress, the woman you have won by the spear, Achilles, to humiliate him. Achilles would have killed him there on the spot had divine intervention not calmed him down. And so he says, I will give up my girl, but I will fight no more. From this day I will fight no more. And Achilles goes and sulks and sits by his ships and abandons the cause of the Greeks, outraged by his treatment at the hands of Agamemnon. So this, the wrath of Achilles, is the theme of the Iliad. The anger of Achilles. Meaning Thea, the poem begins, of the wrath of Achilles sing. It is anger and its consequences. It is a poem about the honor of proud men, but the consequences that come from an excess of such honor and anger. And so Achilles has withdrawn, and the fighting begins. And day after day in this critical period, the Trojans push the Greeks almost to the limit, time and time again coming close to capturing their ships, only to be driven back by the strong arms of heroes like Ajax and Diomedes and Menelaus. Up and down the plain of Troy they war, while Achilles sits in his tent and sulks. An attempt is made to go and to bring him back. He is offered everything that he wants, but the outrage is too great. They never should have taken his girl in the first place, he says, and men like Odysseus should never have stood by while it happened. They had the power to prevent it, and yet they went ahead and let it happen. And so no, I will not come back and fight no matter what. Finally, under the leadership of great Hector, the very ships of the Achaeans are set afire. And at this moment, Achilles' best friend, Patroclus, turns to him and says, let me go out and fight. Let me put on your armor. They will think it is you, the Trojans will, and we will go out and I will lead our men. And you stay here, for your anger is justified. You stay here, but let me go and fight. And so he puts on the armor of his friend Achilles, and Patroclus goes out. And at first the Trojans are in terror at this powerful force moving across the battlefield, because Patroclus is inferior as a warrior only to Achilles himself. And dressed in the armor of Achilles, they think it is the great chieftain come back. And at the very height of the battle, and no one surpasses Homer in the reality with which he describes war. He must have been a man who saw many battles, Homer. He describes how the spear goes into the throat and the black blood boils out afterwards, or of a spear wrenching into the groin, or of a spear driving into the jaw of the man and pulling him out of his chariot like a fish upon a harpoon. He describes how armor clatters upon a hero as he goes down, and then how his soul, squeaking pitifully, flits off to the house of the dead. It is a poem filled not just with the horror of war, but with the sadness of young lives taken away. And so Patroclus moves up and down the field of battle, waging war, until he comes up against the greatest of all the Trojans, Hector. Hector, the hero. And the two of them join in battle. And so mighty is Patroclus that it takes the active intervention of the gods, those who favor the side of Troy, before he is struck down by Hector. And the great spear is driven into his back, and he falls down dead. The word is brought back to Achilles as he sits by his ships that his friend is dead. But not only is his friend is dead because of Achilles. He has gone out because Achilles would not. Had Achilles been there at his side, would he have been killed by Hector? And so the consequences of the anger of Achilles. And he weeps. He will not shave. He will not eat until he has avenged the death of his friend. He has no armor. He prays to his mother, "Bring me armor. Make it for me." For in this world, gods and men, goddesses and women move on an equal level. The gods can intervene and talk to a man. A man can pray to the god. A man can have a divine mother or divine father. Even Zeus himself sires sons who fight on the fields of Troy. And he will not save them from death, even though he could. And so, the divine mother of Achilles has armor made for him by the smith of the gods, Hephaestion. Magnificent armor created all in one night. A shield in which the whole of human life is portrayed upon it and carefully wrought, gold and silver. And putting on this new armor, Achilles goes out. He is like an unstoppable force of nature as he roars into the enemy lines. Not even the divine force of the river can stop him as he sweeps everything before him, searching out one individual as he kills dozens, searching for Hector, searching for the man who killed his friend. And finally he comes upon him. And as they meet in their final combat, Hector says to him, "Let us make a pact. If I kill you, you will respect my body and give it back. And the same will be true for the other." And Achilles says, "There can be no pact between you and me. No more than a lion would make a pact with a dog. I only wish that I could rip your heart out and eat it raw. So much is my hatred for you." And then again, with a realistic description of how the helmet of Hector, just like helmets that we have discovered at archaeological sites, covers the whole of his head, even his eyes, but leaves open just that tiny spot in the throat. There, knowing the armor, since it is his own armor, Hector has stripped it off the body of Patroclus and put it on himself. So he is wearing the armor of Achilles, and Achilles knows this armor, knows that spot is there, and drives his spear deep into it and reviles Hector as he lies there dying. This is a strong poem written for men who know about war. It does not varnish it at all. It shows it in all its glory and terror. But the terror has only begun for the body of Hector, because Achilles is not going to turn him back over to the Trojans. He is going to be sure that body never finds rest. So the whole soul of Hector will never find rest. And he takes that body and ties it behind his chariot and drives around and around the walls of Troy, shaking his fist up at the aged father of Hector and the mother who looked down as their son's body is torn and savaged. This is too much for the gods themselves. They have chosen that Hector must die. And in fact, the scene of the battle between Hector and Achilles shows Zeus placing their respective souls into a weighing machine. And the soul of Hector goes down to death. So the gods have made this choice, even as they have chosen that sooner or later Troy itself must fall. But before that happens, the body of Hector must receive that pious obligation that is due everybody. So the gods are disturbed as the body of Hector is reviled in this fashion. They decide that it will not even spoil, it will not even rot. They will keep it fresh until it can be buried properly. And so Achilles, sitting in his tent late at night, still unwashed, thinking the next day he will get up and ravage the body of Hector some more, receives a visit from the aged king of Troy, Priam. The gods have escorted him there carefully so that he would not be killed as he came through the enemy lines. And this old man comes and enters the tent of Achilles. Achilles recognizes him. And at first he is about to kill him. And then that old man reminds him of his own father. And he thinks, I haven't seen my father for 9 years. How is he? What is he like? And he says, sit down, old man. Let us have something to eat. I have not eaten since I killed your son. Eat. And the old man says, well, I'd rather get my son's body back. And Achilles in a minute says, I could kill you, old man. Now do what I tell you. Eat. He eats. And then Achilles says, what do you want? Let me have my son's body back. All right. Let us have a peace long enough to bury him, to give him a proper funeral rite, to cremated him, in fact. And Achilles says, you will have the requisite time. And then the old man goes back. Now, this poem, in its 9 days, has taken us through the intellectual and moral growth of Achilles. We have seen him as this proud warrior, so caught up in his own honor that he will not allow his mistress to be taken away, that he will withdraw from the fighting, that he will send his own friend to his death rather than give in and give up his pride. To this now weary man sitting there, learning that anything can be carried to excess, pride, even honor, and that his excess has cost him the thing he loved most, his friend, Patroclus. He has grown. He has grown in wisdom and lays the foundation for that most supreme idea of the Greeks, and most true, that we only learn wisdom through suffering. And so Achilles gives back the body. There are then funeral games held for Patroclus, in which we begin to see other of the Greeks, the warriors, these mighty figures, learning that there are times when it is right to step back, to give in. And Homer has carefully led us to this understanding that we should know ourselves, know that we are mortals. There are things that we cannot do. And then, in the final book, the funeral rites of Hector, how he is laid out on a great pyre, how his mother and Helen herself, as well as his wife, pay tribute to all his noble aspects of character. And then he is burned. And the very last line of the Iliad, Hosoi Gomphiopon Tophon Hectorus Hippodamorio. So they celebrated the funeral rites of Hector, breaker of horses. That is how it ends, as life has to end, with death. And Hector has gained this greatest of renown, this glory. But even he must know death. And Homer doesn't take the story any further. The lesson has been learned. But his audience knows that the story goes on, that others will die, that Paris, the cause of all this, will die, and that Achilles himself will die, struck down by an arrow in his heel. For the story was that at birth his mother had sought to make him immortal. She had held him and dipped him into the river Styx, the river of Hades. And everything was immortal except that little part of the heel where she had held him. And it was there that the arrow struck him. You see, nothing can really save us mortals from death. And so, he dies. And the war goes on. The war goes on. It will only come to an end when treachery takes the place of bravery. For one morning, the Trojans wake up and they look out, and the Greeks are gone. After 10 years of warfare, the Greeks are gone. First, they can't believe their good luck. Having lost Hector, nothing, it seemed, could save them from disaster. And so a few go out, and then a few more. And then the whole city goes out. And they walk up and down where the Greek camps had been, where the thousands of campfires had once illuminated the beach. And nothing is there except a giant horse. What is it doing here? A giant horse made of wood. And suddenly, coming up out of the bushes along the shoreline, is a battered and torn man, a Greek. And he tells them, I was going to be offered up as a human sacrifice. The same way Iphigenia had been offered up when we came, I was to be offered up for a safe homecoming. But I got away. And I hate the Greeks who would have killed me, so I'm going to tell you something. And this horse that stands there can be the salvation of your city. For if you bring that horse in, which was set up as a dedication to the goddess Athena, no one can ever capture your city. And you see, the Trojans grasp at this hope. And so they bring the horse into their city. And that night they make merry, they drink and carouse. But in fact, death lies in the belly of that horse, for it is filled with the noblest of Greek soldiers, men like Odysseus. The Greeks have not gone away, they've just sailed over the horizon. And the fleet comes back in the dark of the night, and the heroes let themselves down from the belly of the horse and open the gates, and Troy is captured. And the Trojans are killed. And the women, when the battle is over and their city lies a smoldering heap, they are led off into slavery. Hecuba, Andromache, the mother and wife of great Hector. His little son is thrown down from the walls by the Greeks, lest he grow up and avenge his father. And Troy burns as no city had ever burned before. So the material of Troy ends not simply with the death of Hector, but with the death of his entire nation, with Troy. Now this poem, as composed by Homer, is a literary masterpiece. It is the work of a single creative genius. The beauty of its language, its description of rosy-fingered dawn. How many times do you wake up and look out the mirror, or look out the window, and see this glorious dawn, just as Homer portrayed it? Or his description of the men going forth to battle, breathing their valor, their quiet, steadfast ranks. Or of a warrior chasing another one and coming upon him as a lion comes upon a boar high in the mountains. The spectacular imagery of a poetic language unsurpassed. It is a great book, for it deals with a great theme, and that theme is nothing more than the meaning of life itself and the actions of men like Achilles who found that meaning in the idea of honor. That is a motivating force for an Achilles or an Agamemnon. It is a world of heroes who have honor as their central value. Honor as it means the freedom to make your own choice. Honor as expressed in chivalrous warfare. Honor is expressed in keeping your word, in the honor of truth and oaths among brave men. The great British Prime Minister, William Gladstone, believed that in the Iliad and the Odyssey, you could find all the ethics that you require to live your life. It was as rich and meaningful to him as the Bible. Indeed, he believed that the curriculum at Oxford should be centered around just reading the Iliad and the Odyssey as this great repository of moral wisdom and learning. This story of the moral growth of a great figure like Achilles, and of the ultimate consequences of pride and anger. A story that ends not only with the burning of Troy, but with Agamemnon going back to his own home, carrying with him Cassandra, and in his pride having spurned his wife and sacrificed his daughter, only at the moment of victory to be struck down by his wife and her lover. There in his very palace at Mycenae, she would take vengeance upon him for Iphigenia. A rich and bold tapestry. And from no one do we learn more in the Iliad than the figure of Hector, that noblest of champions of a lost cause. And to him we will turn in our next lecture.